Some video game franchises go big and above and beyond for seemingly forever. Others try to expand and grow by doing new things and trying to get more players and ultimately end up shooting themselves in the foot. We've got 10 examples to talk about today. It's going to get pretty spicy here, so let's get started off with number 10. SimCity is a game franchise that we absolutely miss. From the early days on your computer, building out a city, managing taxes, residential zones, commercial zones, all that stuff is surprisingly addictive. SimCity set the stage for so many other games of this style, and it's pretty much a legend at this point, but it's also kind of in the history books. That's because SimCity 2013. SimCity 2013 seemed to be really ambitious. It seemed to be a big graphical overhaul for the series, way more freedom in your building, less of a grid-based thing. But unfortunately, it released at the time where EA was just at its most villainous. This game was one of the first on the chopping block for games that tried to expand into more of a live service type thing with constant online connectivity and a new engine, but unfortunately it seemed like none of that just really gelled together. The game launch was notoriously disastrous. The fact that you had to be connected online all the time meant that EA servers had issues constantly and you were barely able to even play the game. Along with that, it was incredibly glitchy, you had corrupted saves, so between the game glitching out and you not even being able to access it half the time, it made for an absolutely frustrating launch that persisted for months and months, even after patches. But by that point, SimCity 2013 kind of became the laughingstock. It was one of those early games that people just bagged on online on social media. Now, in 2023, everybody roasts every game constantly, but in 2013, SimCity was one of the big few that was absolutely trashed, and justifiably. The way the game was built, the way the engine was built, and how it worked with the online connectivity just kind of came to a head and absolutely crashed. And by the time the dust settled, people moved on, and unfortunately, SimCity has never really recovered since. This was SimCity's big move into the next generation, a bigger audience, better graphics, online multiplayer, connectivity, all that stuff, but it took the dark side of the road and never recovered. Now SimCity is kind of reduced to mobile games, and thankfully City Skylines has swooped in and really ate their lunch. Will SimCity ever see a big comeback? I don't know. Is it going to end up like the likes of Dungeon Keeper? Maybe, but regardless, it was a damn shame. Next, over at number 9, we have Saints Row from 2022. This was supposed to be the big comeback for Saints Row, kind of a reboot, a refresh to get more people on board. So if you weren't deep in with all the other games and all the lore and Johnny Gat and all that, this was a good starting point and presumably to get more people involved. What it tried to do was combine the gangland antics of the early games with the over-the-top zany ridiculousness of the later games. And by trying to walk a tightrope between those two things and just kind of please everybody, it resulted in kind of nothing. Unfortunately for us here, this new Saints Row was not memorable at all. The humor was kind of awkward, the gameplay wasn't very compelling, the city they built was kind of cool, but it just kind of missed the spice. It missed the spark that the previous games had. Whether you like the old kind of gang turf war stuff or the cartoony comic book violence, Saints Row 2022 managed to have all of it, but made you feel nothing at all. Coupled with, of course, a bunch of glitches and a rough launch, it just wasn't a good combo. There were some people out there that liked it, I'll give credit where credit's due, but ultimately the poor reception did lead to Volition kinda ending up shutting its doors, being absolved into publisher Gearbox. And that's a shame because Volition had a really good run of some great games, and it seems like this might be the end of Saints Row for now, which is really unfortunate. Volition tried before with Agents of Mayhem to capture a bigger audience with a kind of hero shooter thing, and then they tried to reboot Saints Row here, and it was kind of two failures back to back that really was unfortunate to see play out. Next, over at number 8, we're switching gears completely to Turok from 2008. Turok from 2008 is exactly what you would think of a 2008 game. First-person shooter, it's got a bunch of jacked muscle dudes, big guns, fighting dinosaurs, quick time events, and finishing moves. Stuff that sounds cool on paper, but ultimately this game didn't really feel too much like Turok. And that's a shame, because this was supposed to be Turok's big comeback. It had been many years since we'd seen a full mainline Turok game, and although this wasn't connected to the old ones, this was kind of a reboot, it just didn't quite land. And the game technically, like I said, wasn't that bad. It was received middling to okay. It had some cool moments for sure, and interestingly enough, it was weirdly published by Disney Interactive. So something here just didn't quite work out. I don't know what it was, but this wasn't like the start of a big new Turok franchise with a bigger audience, because ultimately it did sell well enough for them to start at least prototyping a sequel, but that studio was eventually shuttered, and we haven't really heard from Turok since, and we really miss the old games. For a lot of people, I think this game was kind of like a Turok, but with the edges shaved off. It didn't have that weird old grit and gore and mystery to it. It was kind of just military shooter with dinosaurs, and in 2008, we had plenty of other military shooters, so Turok ended up just being something completely forgotten. Next, over at number 7, another classic franchise trying to make a big comeback was Thief. In 2014, we got a brand new Thief game. The last game to be released before that was Thief Deadly Shadows, a pretty awesome one. That was 2004, so 10 years later, Thief tried to make a big comeback and be more accessible for a bigger audience, with cool next-gen graphics on PlayStation 4, mobility, gadgets, all that, but unfortunately, it kinda left behind what made the original Thief games, like I'm talking Thief the Dark Project, Thief the Metal Age, what made those special. This was kind of just a straightforward stealth game, not a ton of freedom to achieve your objectives, not really like a sim-like quality. Like Thief was kind of a good hybrid of like Deus Ex style stuff with stealth, just a very PC gamers game, and this new Thief had none of that identity, not to mention the fact that it didn't have Garrett's voice actor. They replaced it with someone else, so the old school fans weren't really too pleased, and I guess it didn't do enough to really bring in new school fans. By any means, it wasn't like the worst game in the world. It's a fairly solid, simple stealth game, but it does not hold a candle to the original Thief games, and that was a bummer. And unfortunately, we haven't really heard much from the series since. Next, over at number 6, we have Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 2042 was supposed to be for the fans. This was supposed to be the biggest, craziest one yet, focused completely around multiplayer, no campaign, still charging full game price, mind you, but with all the modes, features, everything you'd want from a Battlefield game. It was attempting to step a little bit back from like the very realistic war antics from the previous couple of games and just go big and awesome and fun and become the next big thing. But unfortunately, when it released, it was clear that it left behind a lot of stuff that people really liked. It sacrificed a lot of stuff that made Battlefield Battlefield. I mean, just like this whole operator class system that didn't feel quite right based around characters, the fact that it didn't even have like the scoreboard that pops up at the end of the game, and the fact that it was just an absolute broken, buggy mess. You've probably heard about it by now, we've talked it to death, and credit to EA and DICE, they have continued to support and update the game and kind of right the ship, but for some people, the damage is already done. Some people just like to go back and play previous Battlefield games, and this one certainly didn't find a new, bigger audience, that's for sure. Next, over at number 5, we're gonna get a little divisive here, but Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite was supposed to be the next big thing. The Xbox Series X, Microsoft's next generation console launch, and the next big thing in the Halo franchise. Halo Infinite was supposed to be kind of like a soft reboot, if you will, ditching a lot of the baggage from the previous couple of games and going all in on a classic open world Halo campaign and good, refined, simple multiplayer. And to be fair, that gameplay and the early multiplayer days were a ton of fun. But to compete against like the likes of everything, I don't know, Fortnite, Apex Legends, all these big multiplayer games that other people are already playing, Halo had to kind of follow the trends, and I think that's where people kind of fell off. Seasons, battle passes, grinds, a lot of that stuff, especially after launch, wasn't really exciting. It didn't really entice people. It didn't really get people to stick around. And while Halo does now have an audience and people are enjoying some pretty tight gunplay, we will say, it does seem like it hasn't latched on, really hooked in as mainstream as it could have. So while this video is called Games That Died Trying to Broaden Their Audience, and there are plenty of people on subreddits kind of begging 343 to just embrace classic old school fans and not try and make it the next big thing, Halo Infinite isn't necessarily dead. I don't think the Halo franchise is dead, but this was supposed to be the big one. And in terms of like the worldwide conversation around multiplayer video games, it doesn't come up very often, and that's a shame because like we said, the campaign was alright, the actual core gameplay, the loop, the new guns, the maps, all that stuff was solid, but it just didn't stick. Now over at number 4, Metal Gear Survive. Sorry I laugh about this one, but I can't help it as a diehard Metal Gear fan. So this was after a couple of years the dust had settled with the whole Hideo Kojima, Metal Gear Solid series creator, and parent company publisher Konami, that whole fallout. So Hideo Kojima, the brainchild behind the series, was kicked to the curb or went his separate ways, so publisher Konami still owns the Metal Gear brand, and they were intent to continue to pursue it, continue to make money from it, and try new things. People were already skeptical, but I think what killed it off, what killed the goodwill anyone had, was when they quickly released a survival game based around Metal Gear. It used the Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain engine and kind of created this weird little zombie survival game that, while it had a little bit of weird Metal Gear quirkiness to it, sure, just felt so much like it was chasing the multiplayer trends of that time. And that, frankly, pissed anybody off. If Konami was going to successfully launch a brand new Metal Gear Solid game and they showed us this first, forget about it. They took the creative, weird, quirky stealth stuff of Metal Gear Solid and tried to make this weird mainstream zombie defense survival multiplayer game, and it just did not hit. Was it the worst game in the world? No, but it's not what any of us wanted. And that didn't necessarily kill the franchise because, I mean, Metal Gear will live on in the hearts and minds of many, including myself, forever, but Metal Gear Survive definitely killed something. Now down to number 3, we have Command & Conquer Rivals. Command & Conquer is a legendary RTS franchise that people on PC have been loving forever. But it's been years since we've seen anything of merit, and what was kind of the nail on the coffin was CNC Rivals in 2018. Now, when you think Command & Conquer, you think a sweaty nerd at their desk clicking away, managing troops, winning wars, having a good time, and what EA did was took the franchise and just made it a free-to-play mobile game. I don't think that's what any Command & Conquer fan would want at all. I mean, sure, maybe some of them would want to play it on their phone, yeah, I get it, but it just was regular old EA free-to-play shovelware type stuff. Like I said, it was not very well received by fans, and even though it kind of jumped to a mainstream mobile free-to-play thing, I don't think it necessarily found a massive audience there. So was it worth it, EA? I don't think so in this regard, and we haven't seen anything from Command & Conquer since, and that bums us out. Now down to number 2, we have Dino Crisis, specifically with Dino Crisis 3. I think Dino Crisis 3 was very much a product of its time. It was Capcom in a kind of weird point where they were making some mistakes here and there. And in 2003, just a couple of years after the heights of the incredibly awesome Dino Crisis 1 and 2, they went in a completely different direction. They took Dino Crisis and made it sci-fi action. Your badass troopers with cool sci-fi guns and jetpacks trapped on a massive spaceship with a bunch of dinosaurs. Cool in concept, yes, but not necessarily very Dino Crisis-y. Credit to this game, it had its moments. The ship, Ozymandias, the design was really cool, there were some puzzles, there was some depth there, but it just did not really feel like a Dino Crisis game at all. Like, what were you guys thinking? So there was that. A lot of it was poorly received by critics. It wasn't the worst game in the world, in my opinion, but it wasn't where I wanted Dino Crisis to go. So not only was it like a flawed, imperfect thing, it was also an Xbox console exclusive. Yes, it was exclusive to the original Xbox console, which seemed like a weird move for Capcom. After this, that effectively killed the Dino Crisis franchise, and we're still begging for it to return all the time. Maybe it will, I don't know, but I think if it does, it's not going to look anything like Dino Crisis 3. By them going bigger and badder with that one, as cool as it technically was, it had way more of a mainstream feel and really stepped away from that cool dinosaur survival horror thing it established with Shinji Mikami in the earlier days. Again, maybe the series will have a comeback. If it does, I expect it to be way more like Dino Crisis 1 and way less like this Dino Crisis 3. Now down to number 1, sticking with horror, of course, we have to mention Dead Space, the series that lost its way. Yes, the new remake of the original game is absolutely incredible, but what killed off Dead Space was it trying to chase a lot of trends, like EA has done many times that we already mentioned in this video with Dead Space 3 that released in 2013. This was a game that again faced the ire of many gamers for just typical EA stuff. Some shoehorned co-op elements, microtransactions, in the game, and ultimately the game just trying to do more of that mainstream stuff and stepping away from the original, challenging, tense corridors of the original Dead Space. This game felt way less like survival horror, awesome sci-fi action, and just over-the-top run-and-gun co-op stuff. Granted, it was good to still see them continue Isaac's story, and I think at this point, now in 2023, a lot of Dead Space fans have softened on Dead Space 3 and looked back and said, hey, it wasn't that bad, but regardless of how you feel about it, that was kind of the end of the series, the franchise, for a while. Thankfully, with the Dead Space remake, things are kind of coming back. A lot of people are speculating if they're going to remake Dead Space 2 next. We don't know where it's going to go, but we just really hope EA doesn't make the same mistakes they made with Dead Space 3. But hey, those were 10 games that technically died in one way or another when they were trying to broaden their audience. There are so many more examples out there. I had so many other games that we could have included, but we had to round it down to 10, so we might make a part 2. Let us know in the comments what you think. There are plenty of games out there that you probably feel very strongly about that died, walked away from its previous audience, or chased trends, so let us know down there. Of course, some of the games on this list are subject to opinion, so you're gonna have your own agreements and disagreements. Try and keep it civil, but let's talk about any of this stuff down in the comments. And if you like what we do here, we just talk about games with you guys every single day, clicking the like button's all you gotta do. It helps us out very much, and we appreciate it. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.